The early 20th century saw Japan undergoing rapid modernization and industrialization. This transformation brought new challenges. Japan, with limited resources, looked outward to secure its future. Nationalism and economic necessity focused Japan on Manchuria. This region, near Japan's Korean colony, became central to its ambitions. The stage was set for a conflict with far-reaching consequences. Influenced by military leaders, Japan saw Manchuria as vital. Manchuria's resources seemed to offer a solution. Japanese expansionism met resistance from China, creating a volatile situation. Japan's rapid industrialization in the late 19th and early 20th centuries created an insatiable demand for raw materials. Coal, iron ore, and timber became essential to fuel its factories and shipyards. Manchuria, with its abundant natural resources, was viewed as a lifeline for Japan's continued economic growth. The Japanese government, heavily influenced by powerful business conglomerates known as, saw Manchuria as a source of raw materials and a market for its manufactured goods. The acquisition of resources was not the sole motivation. Japan was also driven by a sense of strategic vulnerability. Surrounded by larger powers, Japan felt increasingly insecure and sought to establish a buffer zone in Manchuria. This sense of vulnerability was further exacerbated by the global economic depression of the 1930s. As international trade collapsed and protectionist measures rose, Japan's need for secure resources became even more acute. Manchuria, therefore, became increasingly attractive as a solution to both its economic and strategic anxieties. On the night of September 18, 1931, an explosion occurred near a railway line in Mukden, present-day Shenyang. The Japanese army claimed it was sabotaged by Chinese nationalists and used it to invade Manchuria. The Mukden Incident was a staged event to justify Japan's military takeover. Evidence suggests the explosion was likely staged by Japanese officers. The Kwantung Army exploited the incident to justify its expansionist ambitions. They quickly seized control of key cities and communication lines. This marked the beginning of Japan's 15-year war in China, leading to World War II. The Japanese invasion of Manchuria was swift and brutal. The Kwantung Army, well-equipped and highly motivated, met limited resistance from the poorly trained and ill-equipped Chinese forces in the region. Within months, Japan had occupied all of Manchuria, a territory larger than France and Germany combined. The speed and ease with which Japan conquered Manchuria shocked the world and exposed the limitations of the League of Nations in dealing with acts of aggression. The Kwantung Army, operating with a high degree of autonomy, employed a combination of military force, intimidation, and propaganda to secure its control. They faced opposition from local Chinese forces and civilian volunteers, but these groups were outmatched in terms of training and equipment. The Japanese military government quickly established a system of control, exploiting existing administrative structures and co-opting local elites. This swift and decisive victory emboldened the Japanese military and fueled its expansionist ambitions in Asia. Having secured military control over Manchuria, Japan sought to legitimize its occupation by establishing a puppet state. In 1932, the puppet state of Manchukuo was proclaimed with the last Qing emperor, Puyi, installed as its head of state. Manchukuo, however, was nothing more than a facade. Real power rested firmly in the hands of the Japanese military advisors who controlled every aspect of the new state's administration. The establishment of Manchukuo was met with international condemnation. The League of Nations refused to recognize the new state, declaring it a violation of China's territorial integrity. Despite this, Japan continued to consolidate its control over Manchuria, exploiting its resources and suppressing any dissent. The creation of Manchukuo served as a blueprint for Japan's later attempts to establish a greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere, a euphemism for Japanese hegemony in the region. The League of Nations, formed after World War I to prevent future conflicts, proved powerless to stop Japanese aggression in Manchuria. Despite condemning the invasion and refusing to recognize Manchukuo, the League failed to take any meaningful action against Japan. This inaction emboldened Japan and undermined the credibility of the League as an effective peacekeeping organization. The League's failure to act decisively in the Manchurian crisis had far-reaching consequences. The United States, preoccupied with the Great Depression, offered only verbal protests. European powers, entangled in their own internal problems, were reluctant to confront Japan directly. The League, lacking any real enforcement mechanism, could only issue condemnations and impose economic sanctions, which Japan largely ignored. This failure to enforce its own covenant demonstrated the League's limitations and foreshadowed its impotence in the face of further aggression by the Axis powers in the years to come. Under Japanese rule, Manchuria experienced a period of rapid economic development, but at a high cost. The Japanese military government implemented policies designed to exploit Manchuria's resources for the benefit of the Japanese war machine. Thousands of Japanese farmers and industrial workers were resettled in Manchuria, displacing local populations and transforming the region's demographic landscape. The indigenous population faced widespread discrimination, forced labor, and brutality at the hands of the Japanese occupiers. Resistance movements emerged, but were ruthlessly suppressed by the Japanese military police, who employed brutal tactics to maintain order. Manchuria became a testing ground for Japan's imperial ambitions, foreshadowing the brutality and oppression that would characterize its wartime conduct in other parts of Asia. Section 8. Seeds of War Manchuria to Nanjing and beyond. The invasion of Manchuria was a pivotal event in the lead-up to World War II. It marked the beginning of Japan's open defiance of the international order and its unchecked aggression in Asia. The League of Nations' failure to effectively challenge Japan's actions emboldened other aggressor nations like Italy and Germany. The invasion also deepened the rift between Japan and China, setting the stage for the Second Sino-Japanese War in 1937. The conflict in Manchuria served as a training ground for the Japanese military, allowing it to test new tactics and equipment that would be deployed on a larger scale in later conflicts. The experience gained in Manchuria contributed to the Japanese military's confidence and sense of invincibility, factors that would ultimately contribute to its downfall in World War II. Section 9. A Legacy of Bitterness, Post-War Reflections. The legacy of the invasion of Manchuria continues to cast a long shadow over relations between Japan and China. The brutality of the Japanese occupation, the economic exploitation, and the human rights abuses are still vividly remembered in China. While Japan has officially apologized for its wartime actions, issues of compensation and historical revisionism continue to strain relations between the two countries. In Japan, the invasion of Manchuria is a sensitive topic. While some acknowledge the atrocities committed, others downplay or deny them, fueling resentment in China and other countries that suffered under Japanese occupation. The differing narratives surrounding the invasion of Manchuria highlight the challenges of historical reconciliation and the importance of honest reflection on the past. Section 10. Lasting Impacts. The Manchurian Scar. The invasion of Manchuria had profound and long-lasting impacts on East Asia. It destabilized the region, led to decades of conflict, and sowed the seeds of mistrust that persist to this day. The event marked a turning point in international relations, demonstrating the ineffectiveness of collective security and emboldening aggressor nations. The invasion also had significant geopolitical consequences. It facilitated the rise of militarism and nationalism in Japan, contributing to its role in World War II. Furthermore, it created a power vacuum in Manchuria that was eventually filled by the Soviet Union, influencing the dynamics of the Cold War in Asia. Section 11. Conclusion. A harbinger of global conflict. The invasion of Manchuria in 1931 was not merely a regional conflict, but a harbinger of the global conflict that would engulf the world a few years later. It exposed the fragility of the post-war peace, the limitations of international institutions, and the dangers of unchecked aggression. The events in Manchuria serve as a stark reminder of the human cost of war and the importance of diplomacy, dialogue, and a rules-based international order in preventing future conflicts. The invasion of Manchuria was a tragedy for millions of people in China and a pivotal event that set in motion a chain of events with global consequences. Remembering and understanding this historical turning point is crucial to navigating the complex geopolitical landscape of the 21st century and striving for a more peaceful and just world.